we're now going to have a look at this question here. Just before we do, I'm just going to let you know that we're going to do a question for elevation and depression based on finding an unknown side. And then we are going to do a question for elevation and depression which calculates an unknown angle. And what you probably will find here is the tan button will be what we use, because generally for these questions the sides that they're trying to get us to find will end up falling in the TOA. For tan is opposite over adjacent category, therefore we're going to use the tan button. So as I read through these questions, I'm going to fill in the diagrams with the measurements, and then we can have a look and go from there. An 8-meter tree casts a shadow when the sun is at an angle of elevation of 40 degrees. So I know that this is an 8-meter tree, and the angle of elevation from the ground here up to the sun, because this is the shadow here that I've drawn, is 40 degrees. Find the length of the shadow, correct to 1 decimal place. So because we're using meters here, I'm going to use meters here as well. So from that information, it tells me that I have to use the 8-meter tree, the 40 degrees, and I've got to figure out the shadow length. So if we start labeling this, this is the height, this is the opposite, and this is the adjacent. So looking at this, I can see we have no hypotenuse, we have an opposite, and we have an adjacent, and that tells me it's a tan. So I write the rule, tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. And now we take that and we repeat this down the bottom here, but now we substitute in the values. So theta represents 40 degrees, the fraction line goes down, and the opposite is 8, and the unknown is the adjacent of x. Because it's a denominator, an unknown denominator, we're going to do some swaps here. We're going to circle the x, the unknown, and the tan 40, and we are going to swap it round and rewrite. So x now features on the left-hand side, 8 sits on top still, and tan 40 degrees is now on the bottom. And so now we are going to calculate 8, ABC fraction button, tan 40 equals, and we get a number that is 9.53402871. And then if we think about rounding this, so I'm thinking that we might be able to round this to 1 decimal place. So I'm going to put a line between the first and second decimal and underline the looking number. And when I round this, I look at that looking number and it's showing me between 0 and 4, which tells me the rounding number will stay. So my answer is 9.5, and it is in meters. We are now going to focus on angles of depression. The question says, a boat is sighted from the top of a 10-meter high cliff at an angle of depression of 25 degrees. So we know it's a 10-meter cliff and it's a 25-degree angle of depression. The reason I draw it in here and not the top is because we fit it inside the triangle. We need to remember this is an alternate angle. So from here, the person looks down and sights the boat, and these are alternate angles, which means that they are equal. Find the distance correct to 2 decimal places. The boat is from the base of the cliff. So we need to know how far it is from the base of the cliff. So this is the distance we're looking for here. That's why I've put X meters in there. So first thing we have to do is label the diagram, label the triangle to see what we are going to press, if it's a sine, a cos, or a tan button. So that's the height. This is the opposite, and the adjacent sits next to the angle. So I can see we've got an adjacent, an opposite, and no height. So it's a TOA, it's a tan. So let's write this down now. So tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. And now we are going to substitute in. So tan and the angle of 25 degrees equals, now 10 is our opposite and our unknown is a denominator, it's x. From there, what we're going to do is circle, and circle. And we are going to swap them around and rewrite. So x equals 10 over tan 25 degrees. Now we're going to work down and punch it into our calculator. 10 divided by tan 25 equals, and we get a number of 21.44506921. And I think what we'll do now for this one is round to 2 decimal places. So I'm going to place a line between the second and third decimal place and underline the looking number. This looking number tells me I've got to round up because it sits in the category between 5 and 9. So x equals 21.45, and it is metres, so we write the units of measurement metres. Let's now focus on finding the missing angles for elevation and depression. The question says here, a 25 metre high building casts a shadow of 16 metres. So we know that this building is 25 metres tall, and the shadow down here that it's casting is 16 metres. Find the angle of elevation, so this is our angle theta, of the sun correct to the nearest degree. So what that means is the sun is over here, it's casting a shadow, and they want to know the angle to where the sun is actually shining. So this is where the end of the shadow is. So we are finding an angle, so therefore the process is slightly different to what we've just done. So now we have to label our triangle. So that's the height opposite the right angle. Opposite the theta is the opposite, and what's down next to the angle is the adjacent. So I have no height, an adjacent, and an opposite. It's a TOA question, which means it's a tan question. So tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. Now we're going to substitute in for our second line. So tan theta, we don't know what this is yet because that's what we're trying to find out, the missing angle. We're going to substitute these values in. So we have an opposite, which is 25, and an adjacent, which is 16. And now we're going to use our calculator. We need to click second function, tan 25, ABC fraction button 16 equals, and we are going to get an answer of 57.380,75693. And we have to do some rounding. And the question says that we need to round to the nearest degree because we always do that for angles. So we put a line in front of the first decimal place and underline the looking number. In this case, the looking number is sitting between 0 and 4, which tells me that this number is going to stay. So we have an angle of elevation of 57 degrees. Let's now take a look at this last question for angle of depression. It says a boat is sighted 10 metres from the base of an 8 metre high cliff. So the base of the cliff to the boat is 10 metres, and it's an 8 metre high cliff. Find the angle of depression correct to the nearest degree. So we're going to put a theta in here because that's what we've got to find, the angle. Bearing in mind that this is the Z shape, the alternate angles we've been looking at. And this is the depression angle, but because it's alternate angles, we can draw it inside the triangle so we can calculate our angle using the correct rule. It wouldn't work if we were sitting on the outside. So let's label the triangle first. We have a hypotenuse, we have an opposite, and we have an adjacent. And I can see we've got an adjacent, an opposite, and no height, which tells me it's a tan question because it's TOA, T-O-A, O and A. So we write the rule for tan, which is tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. And now we're going to do our substitution line. So tan theta equals, we're now going to substitute the opposite, which is the 8, and the adjacent, which is the 10. And now we're going to use our calculator. So we press second function button tan, 8 ABC fraction button 10 equals, and we get an answer of 38.659,80825. And because we have to calculate this to the nearest degree, we must round it. So we put a line in front of the first decimal and put a line underneath the looking number of 6. The looking number is between 5 and 9, which tells me that this must go up. So theta equals 39 degrees. Now, for all worded questions, you have to have a worded answer. Every question that we've done in this video has been a worded question. So I'm going to do an example for a worded answer for this final question. So you put your therefore statement, and I would normally put it underneath this, but we're running out of room. We can say the angle of depression is 39 degrees. And that's it. You don't need to write too much more than that. As long as it's relevant to the question being asked and the answer's in the therefore statement, you're absolutely fine. So it's up to each individual, but there's a very basic one for you as an example.